I started these conversations to discuss leadership, mentorship, growth, and so much more from voices you may not have heard from before. I hope the conversations inspire you, motivate you, and give you something to think about. This is Leadership in Colour from myself, Saigon, supported and powered by me. Welcome to Leadership in Colour. So pleased to have today Suresh Raj, Chief Growth Officer at McCann, New York. There are a few people that you kind of stumble upon their LinkedIn posts and you think, hey, that could be an interesting person to connect with. And Suresh was one of those. So I saw some of your LinkedIn posts, especially about Cannes this year, and reached out. And so pleased that you responded to that. And now you're here. And this conversation is going to be fantastic. In fact, Suresh hasn't told me this, but I know from the little bit of time that we've had together, he's a little bit competitive. And I'm sure this is going to be his aim's going to be to make this the best conversation we've had yet. Is that fair?
That's a slight understatement. Very competitive, overachiever. But yes, I do like aiming for the stars. And Shez, thank you so much for the opportunity. Thank you for reaching out. Thank you for the conversation, and thank you for the opportunity.
So tell me a bit about your upbringing, because you mentioned, of course, the South East Asian name and sort of heritage back then, and your parents come from a very diverse background, but you spent a lot of time in Malaysia, right?
Yeah, so I was born and brought up in Malaysia. My parents are both first generation Malaysians. So, just to give you some context on the history of Malaysia as a country, it is a peninsula at the end of Thailand, just above Singapore. Everybody knows Singapore. It's a tiny little dot, and Malaysia's there's a big peninsula above it. But Malaysia was actually the global trading route for the Arabs, the Indians, and the Chinese. And like, if you know anything about Malaysian culture today, if you ever visit the country, the three major races in the country are the Chinese, the Malays, the Indians. That's what makes up Malaysia. And in fact, the word Malaysia means Malay being the dominant race, and Sia is a combination of both the Indians and Chinese. It's a cosmopolitan society. So I grew up in a culture where I had Chinese friends, I had Indian friends, I had Malay friends, and we all lived harmoniously together. Having said harmoniously, mostly people married within their own races. Enter my parents, who decided they're going to break the rules from the word go. So they were first generation Malaysians, and in fact, their own families had intermarriage themselves. So kind of rule breakers from the word go. But the difference was religion. So on my dad's side, they kept to the Christian religion, and my mum's side, they kept to the Muslim religion. And when my parents got married, the Muslim side of my mum and the Christian side of my dad decided to get married, and that was a cultural taboo. Beyond just the mix of the cultures, the mix of the ethnicities, it was the mix of the religion. So there a lot of complication there in terms of my dad had to become Muslim to marry my mother. Then they both converted out and became Christians. And in Malaysia, a Muslim country, that's considered apostasy. So my upbringing was literally in a country where we were already the anomaly, ethnically an anomaly within the local cultural set. And then religiously an anomaly. And so that was the upbringing that I knew in a country down in Southeast Asia. At the age of 21, I had the opportunity to pursue my education. I was a fairly decent student to do my degree in the UK, where I landed in London and lived there for a further 21 years. So I got my degree, I did my MBA, and started my career in the United Kingdom. So worked there for about 16 years, and then with my role, moved from London to New York, and I've been here coming up to 10 years now. So and I'm very grateful for this, to be honest, because not a lot of people particularly from my generation and my part of the world, had the opportunity to really just go and explore the world and absorb culture and live in different sorts of communities. And I genuinely treasure and value that, because I think it's made me who I am as an individual. In terms
No,
of
that's great history. Although I think there's a part of you that really makes you who you are that you've skipped over there, and that is the fact that you're in a boy band.
Yes.
I,
Yeah, I
I
quickly
think
bypassed that stage.
yeah, you sort of like went through this like, yeah, I was in Malaysia, I was in the UK, no, mate, you're in a boy band.
Yes, for all my sins. So the overachiever part of me. So as I mentioned, I was a good student. So my parents had this. As you know, any Asian person listening to this would know that were born and destined for at least four major careers: a doctor, a lawyer, an accountant, or an engineer. Any one of this is moment of pride for every Asian parent. So I was particularly good at school, and there was a real passion and hope that I would end up being either an accountant or a lawyer, because I was good and I was a national debater, I was a national elocutionist, and I was very good in math. So like those are my strong subjects. So my parents went, "This is it. He's a good student. He's straight A's, really good in these areas. So that's what he's going to end up with." And to be honest, I had no path. I loved what I did. Like I love studying as the form and craft of studying, and I could study anything, and I enjoyed it. And in my sort of in when I was 18, 19, I had an opportunity to go up to the capital. I was in the very south of Malaysia, small little village was where I grew up, and I had a chance to go and do my sort of equivalent of like a pre-college education. And whilst there in the capital, I ended up joining. I was a staunch Christian. And I was one of the members of a Christian band, and it was more around doing something I enjoyed. I'm a musician by ear. I'm not a trained musician, but I love playing the piano, playing the drums. I write my own songs, I sing, and I had the option to be in this Christian rock band, and I loved it. Like hadn't realized what music was such a deep passion, and it made me come alive, to be honest. And so I just carry that passion. My parents go, "Oh, that's nice. He plays for a church band. That's nice. God will bless him." But keep on your studies, right? And so like I always knew my path was not to end in Malaysia. I had an opportunity to go to the UK, so I knew my education would continue. So in that mindset, I knew that the band was a passion point, but I hadn't realized that I actually did have a talent for it. And so when I went to the UK, within the first 3 months of being in the UK, I would just sing everywhere, like in the halls of like not like perform. I'd just be singing in the shower, singing in my room, etc. And a number of friends of mine said, like, you really have a talent. You should go and audition for, just audition and go into these open mic nights, etc. And in the first 3 months, I'd never seen a musical. The West End. I'd never seen a musical in my life, so I didn't know what they were. And there was a girl, I remember her name was Susan Blackwell. I'll never forget her. And she was a massive musical fan, and living in the halls of residence, same as me. And she slipped a paper cutting of a open call auditions for Miss Saigon back in London, and slipped it underneath. And it's a funny story. And I kind of, heck, I'll just go do it. And the power of naivety, by the way, the power of just being genuinely, authentically interested in doing something and passion with no training. So I'm not a trained singer. I have no background in it. I just happen to be in a band and I love to sing. So I turn up in Drury Lane in Covent Garden, and one cold November, December morning in 1994, 3 months into arriving in the UK. I'm a student at Middlesex University, and I had three friends join me: Susan, Corian, and Maven. And and as I arrived, I realized how serious this was, because yet this professional singers, actors, dancers, etc., literally doing the splits and stretches, etc. And I turned up in like jeans and a t-shirt, and everybody's bringing their headshots, like big old headshots, etc. And we're like, what the heck have I done? Like, this looks quite serious. And I started to get real, and I'd never been into theatre, and this is a massive theatre, Drury Lane. So, and I should contextualize this, I'd never heard any of the soundtrack of the musical of Miss Saigon. So overnight, I had to learn this song because I was auditioning for a role called, I think it's Chris. It's a supporting lead role. And there's a massive song that he sings. It's actually the biggest song in the musical, called Bui Doi, which is about the lost children of Vietnam due to the war. And so I had to memorize the song overnight. Till 3 in the morning, I was in the music room in the halls of residence, and learning the song. So we turn up, and after like so many people are gathering, I was like the sixth person to register for the day. And as I turn up to register, they say, your name, blah blah blah, and they go, "Oh, can you share your headshot?" And I don't have a headshot. I don't know what it is. So I pulled out my Malaysian passport photograph to them, and they literally looked at it and goes, are you serious? And goes, yep, that's all I have. So I literally, and that's my point of naivety. Literally, they clipped it to my application. And as I sat down, like people were going in, as I said, I was the sixth one to register. Like, this is so embedded in my memory. And I turned to my friends and said, I'm not doing this. This is ridiculous. I can't believe I mustered the courage to come here to do this. I'm so embarrassed. And literally goes, no, you're like the next person, and you should just do this. I went, no. So I got up and said, we're leaving. As I got up, the door opened, and Gillian Schofield, who was the casting director, opens the door and goes, and literally goes, I'm like, oh, shit. So my friend says, just go and do it. So I walked in, and it's the first time I've walked to the massive Drury. If you've ever been, massive Drury Lane Theatre. It's got the helicopter that they lower in the show. It's right up there on the stage, and there's a pianist. The engineering booth that had like three people in there, and everything else was dimly lit, well, or not lit. It's literally there's a spotlight on stage, there's the light of the engineering booth, the sound booth, and then I'm literally walking down, and they say, anytime you're ready. So I get onto stage, I give the pianist the score, and it's to the song Buidoy, and then the spotlights come on, and I can't see anything, and I start singing, and it's, as I said, it's a very big song. I remember the first two lines, Shez, literally just the first two lines. And then I made the whole song up. I just made up lyrics because I couldn't remember. I blanked completely. But what I did do is I finished the song. So I did all however minutes, 4 minutes plus of it. I can't remember how long the song was. I remember thinking at the end of it, as I ended the last note, I closed my eyes and I thought, oh dear God, I need a paper bag. I'm just going to walk straight out and not make a big deal about the situation, which is so incredibly embarrassing. The pianist gave me back the score. And then running down the aisle was this guy. And I said, and I was like, I'm so sorry. I'm really, really sorry. I'm very embarrassed. And he goes, no, that was amazing. Can you start on Wednesday? And I went, literally, my response is, were you not listening? And he goes, no, yeah. He said, I don't care about the lyrics, but your voice, you have a talent. And it's so raw, so nurturing, and I want to just get you in. So we start on Wednesday. So I walked out and like completely gobsmacked. I just didn't know what just happened. Walked out. Gillian comes running after me and goes, oh, by the way, here's the paperwork you need, equity, etc. Can you just get it ready and bring it with you on Wednesday? The guy was Sir Cameron Mackintosh. So he was the one who spotted the talent. So I immediately, like, because it was a 6 month, the way West End works, you get contracts for 6 months, and I was on a student visa at that point. So I called my parents and said, I really want to do this. I really think I've got a talent here, and I'd love to pursue it. And of course, naturally, they said, well, no. But if you decide you want to do that, then we're no longer supporting your education. You're on your own. So for me, I literally the most sort of common sense side of me go, well, I don't want to risk that because I do want to have something to fall back on if this doesn't take off. And the contract with the West End was only for 6 months. At the end of that, you don't know what's going to happen next. And let's be honest, Jess, how many roles are there for people of color in the West End? And that role was a role of color, and particularly played by a black man in the show. But I for some reason passed for that role. So I turned it down. But that was the sort of the acorn that grew into the boy band. Sorry, it's a long-winded story that gets to the boy band. So what I told myself is, okay, fine, I'll focus. I'll do my degree, and when I graduate, I'll pursue my music. So to the day of graduation, literally the convocation happened that day in 1996 or so. The very next day, there was an open call audition for a boy band being put together by MTV. And so I went. I quietly didn't tell my parents. I graduated. I did my degree. I did really well. I ended with a very good degree and really excelled in school. But I trudged all the way up to Camden, did the live auditions, and it was the very first pan-European reality music TV show. So you think about the X Factors, Pop Stars, etc. That was the very first one, Search for a Boy Band. And they audition guys all over Europe, primarily Sweden, Germany, and the UK. And it was a live phone in. So once you audition, the people were phoning in and shortlisting, etc. and I didn't have a TV. I was living in a bedsit above a Greek restaurant. Interesting fact, my landlord was Stavros Flatley, so the guy from Britain's Got Talent, Dimitri Demetrius. And so for 3 months, I didn't know that the voting was happening because I didn't actually have a TV and I didn't have MTV. 3 months in, I get a call from Boris. I can't remember his name, but he was a video jockey, and Davina McCall. She was the host of the show. She was at MTV at that point, and I was one of the five selected to be in the boy band. So that was my brush with fame. I did it for about 2 years, and then realized there was no money in it. So after graduating, I was dirt poor. I was washing dishes in Dimitri Dimitri's restaurant, Sestaki Taverna in North London on Bramley Road. And after 2 years of just living in a bedsit and not having any money, but having fame, people saw me on TV. We were performing, we are opening clubs and like opening nights in clubs, etc. Uh, it was just a very, very soul-destroying industry. Because maybe there was a tipping point, but and this is fact. I remember being in an interview with a newspaper. I don't even know if it's around anymore. I appeared on like ZTV and some of these Asian channels, and Asian Voice was a newspaper. I don't know whether it's still around now. They were doing a double page spread on me because I was the only person of color and Asian, in particular Southeast Asian, Middle Eastern mix. The rest were two English guys, a white Swedish guy, and a black German guy. For me, I was the first time a Asian artist broke mainstream. We were an MTV boy band performing, and like literally, I sat on the sofa with John Landis, who's the director of Michael Jackson's Thriller and black and white video. Like we were like that was the level we were at. And we actually were the opening act for the Spice Girls in Popcom. They'd already hit two or three number ones at that point. And they were doing an interview on me saying like it's an amazing story about an Asian artist breaking mainstream, and we'd love to do this double spread on you. And then Pedro, the editor of the newspaper at that point, said, so you must be minting now. Like we've heard about what you've been doing in terms of opening clubs, and they're like, absolutely not. It's all promotional work. Like I had to invest the time. I was taking the tube. I was getting my own designers because of my connections on MTV. I got my own designers to actually help me with clothes, etc. for the show. And he goes, no, no, no. I heard that you were paid £15,000 to do that opening night at the Empire Cinema in Leicester Square. I went, what? And I like literally went to my manager, and the manager I had at that point was the manager from the 80s who would manage Human League and Culture Club, etc. And I was like a young, naive artist, starving artist, just wanted to do it for the love of the art. And I'd spoken to him, and I said, I heard I got paid. And goes, yeah, yeah, but that, based on your contract, the first so many hundreds of thousands or £1 million or whatever is due to all the investment that they're putting in to promote me. So I see nothing. And I just realized 2 years in, I had no food. Literally, I was living on £500 a month, paying a £140 rent in a bedsit and no heating. Like it was an awful time. So I just jacked it all in, completed my MBA, and then got a job in the marketing communications industry. Long story.
It's a really good story though, so I do appreciate you sharing it in its entirety. There's a lot to unpack there. I mean, the reality is
Mm,
that, as if I'd gone through that audition and then my parents had said, no, you can't go for it, I think I would have done exactly what you did. But I don't know, but that's not advice for anybody. Like I just want to flag that I'm not saying that's something what, if anyone else finds themselves in that situation, I'm not saying that they should go either way, but I probably would have done the same thing. And that's a real cultural thing, right? Like we just want to please our parents, but we also want stability. I think, coming from that generation where our parents had an element of struggle,
mm,
you've seen it, you've seen them have conversations about money openly. So you just don't want any of that, right? Like you just want a
yeah.
better life. So you end up going for the thing that makes the most amount of sense, or going for common sense. But I do commend you on then after graduation just going for it, like following your dream, because that's not how the story usually pans out. And the fact that you were able to see it through and live it, and there must have been a lot of lessons along the way that you've brought into your corporate career.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%. And I think, and actually, they're not necessarily good lessons, but they were lessons indeed.
Mm.
I realized very quickly, and maybe the artists that followed, and not I don't know him at all. There was no connections whatsoever. But I remember years later, not too long, a few years later, Jay Sean, do you remember him? Jay Sean
Jay
came
Sean's,
out
I
with,
think Jay Sean's first single, whatever it was with Juggy D, I think it's got some sort of anniversary this year.
oh, really?
Yeah, yeah,
Right.
it's been a long time.
Yeah.
I can't remember how many years, but it's been like a long, yeah, it's like an anniversary year.
So when they did that article on me, they talked about me being the very first ever Asian artist to cross mainstream. And when I say mainstream, i.e., and I'm going to be direct, it's like, white music, right? Or cultural music, pop culture music. But it was weird because I was singing in English. And it's so weird because like even when I worked with music directors and publishers and songwriters, they would always in my music in the tracks they put the we'll put the sound of a tabla in. We'll put the sound like why? I don't know how to play it. It's not my instrument. Like I play the piano and the drums. Like that's what I grew up with. But it's so weird. And then I realized very quickly, and that's the translation to the corporate world, people immediately put you into a box because they see you think that's what you are. You do that. And I was trying to break out of that. And not that I was trying to break out of it. I didn't realize there was a box. Like that's the thing. Like in my mind, there was no box. I speak 4 or 5 languages, and like, well, my first language is English because it's a common language between my parents. They have different cultures, so I've always spoken English. I know how to sing in English, and that's my background. But when they see you, the color of your skin and your ethnicity and your background, they go like, oh, okay, you should only sing to this audience. You should only talk to this audience, and that's the only thing you would know. And I think that was the frustration. And funny enough, that's often 26 years into my career, and that environment hasn't changed. People tend to see you in a box, and they like to put you in a box. I think that's what you can do, and it's very demoralizing. But then when you think about, you add the combination of being an overachiever and somebody who just doesn't think they belong in a box because there is no box that should exist in the first place. That gives you the fuel. And the passion to really push boundaries. So I've tried to use that. Not that I've engineered myself to have that emotion, etc. I just, well, why not? Why is there a box? Why are we sort of configuring ourselves within a certain sort of framework? So I try to use that as a reason to like break boundaries.
So, I want to ask you this question. So, and I'm projecting my own experience here. Have you ever on a team been approached as IT support?
I'll do one better. I was working, I was the business development director for a very well-known PR agency in the UK. I won't name the agency because they're amazing people. I loved my time. It's one of the best periods of my career ever. And we had a world multinational global client in the confectionery industry. Really good. And we had just done some of the most amazing work, and this is going back to the early 2000s, and doing some amazing work for them. And they were holding a benefit or a banquet of some sort, celebrating their charitable work in Africa. And it was at the Landmark Hotel in London. And we'd all turned up, and we had a table. And I wore what I thought, a very distinguished looking white tuxedo. So black trousers, white jacket, very nice tie, etc. And there were multiple tables, and in the midst, and it was heartbreaking to be honest to even think about it again now. During the performance, we had African tribes come in and perform in loincloth. I'm not diminishing that because it's tribal, it's heritage, it's rich history, etc. What I'm what I'm really affected by is how the community around it, particularly the majority were, as you can expect, very, very Caucasian led, and nothing is it. I'm married to a Caucasian, so I'm not sort of belittling that in any which way. But the number of sort of Caucasians who got up and just started clapping, I just felt like, oh dear God, I feel like I'm in the middle of a colonized country. And then unfortunately, one of the performers, their loincloth dropped. And they were not naked, but their loincloth dropped, and the amount of laughter that went around the room, and it really crushed me. Like why are we like people talk about Africa like it's people living in trees. Have you seen Nigeria? Have you seen Kenya? Like have you seen some of these countries are so modern, and people have this image of that's what Africa is, or even that's what Asia is. When then people talk about Malaysia, they think, "Oh, do you guys still live on trees? Do you use slippers? Do you use shoes?" Like super ultra modern countries, right? So I was very affected by what I just saw, and I had to remove myself. And I'd taken out my BlackBerry at that point, and I was going to go to the loo, and I just wanted to get away from that scene. And as I was walking, one of the other tables turned to me and said, "Excuse me, waiter, could we have more wine?" And I looked at him and I said, "I'm a guest." And so I don't need to be called IT boy. I've been called, and no disrespect to being a waiter. That's in France, it's a profession by anybody of any color. But it was the assumption that the person of color in the room was the waiter, not a guest. In fact, a guest of the client who we were supporting. And so it's happened many times. Not so sure I've had the IT thing because I'm useless at IT, but I've been mistaken for a very sort of diminished role for what I currently do.
So I think the thing about I'm a big fan of Africa, right? Like I love the culture, of the heritage. My wife is from the contingency of Asians that came through via East Africa,
Hmm.
and I've got family, that part of that contingency as well.
Mm.
But I have to admit that I also find it a little bit, I don't know, cringe is the right word, but uncomfortable when I watch performances of the African tribal dances and what have you, only because, and I kind of get the feeling that you were there as well. There is this sort of like, yeah, I think Commonwealth type feeling where, oh right, these people have been brought out to entertain us, and it's it's usually in mostly white or Caucasian rooms. And it's wrong that maybe it's wrong that I feel that way because there is an art in what they do and the dance.
Hmm.
I think,
Hmm.
they're far more athletic. They're a million times more athletic than I am, and I could never do any of that. And if my children are able to do some of that dancing or that, if they're that athletic, that'd be phenomenal. I'd be so proud of them. But at the same time, I'd love to see representation of some of the other cultural and art components, that come from Africa, which is a huge continent. There is some discomfort. There's something there. I can't quite put the words to it, but there is a feeling that is intangible that that sticks with you.
Yeah, say that as somebody who's come from a colony,
Mm.
and it's just watching the way the far right movement in the UK today about get everybody who's not born and brought up or English in that sense, get them out of the country, um, is the kind of feeling you get when you sit in a room filled with colonizers watching a tribal dance, right? It's not a um, celebration of the art and the craft because there is, and you see it in the arts and the craft and the context of what it is. Like I know there are very traditional Malaysian dances that if colonizers were to look, and I use that word purposefully, colonizers, it always feels like there is an level of society that's upper crust and better
Mm.
than everybody else, and then there's all the local tribes and they're performing for us, and it's a feeling you cannot get rid of, and actually it's very hard to actually live through that every day, and that's the lens we live through every day.
Yeah. But if I think about it as a contrast, right? If I was in Pakistan, which is where my family's from,
Mm.
and there was a conference at an event there, and then we got a bunch of guys coming through with the pomp and ceremony of a bit of Morris dancing. I don't know how that would be received.
Hmm.
I don't know. Firstly, if those people, assuming they were all white that were dancing, right? I don't know how they would feel about it. I don't know
Yeah.
if they would feel comfortable. And there is a part of me that really feels like they would be given a lot more respect somehow in the room, but I could be wrong because I've never been to a conference like this, so I could be completely wrong. Maybe they would be taking the mick out of the dance a little bit, or maybe there would be a slight, maybe a similar feeling in the atmosphere.
I would say, and just instinctively, first of all, I've never seen that happen
Yeah,
because it's always the other way around
exactly.
that we've ever experienced. But if it were to happen, and I'll give you this from a cultural lens, growing up in Malaysia, if you were married to a Caucasian, or you had a Caucasian at your event or in your circle, you were seen as a better person.
Mm,
You are immediately elevated in your level of thinking. And I just generally think that's simply because of living in a colony. Like, we were a British colony, and the British Empire, and before that, the Dutch, before that, the Portuguese. Locals always just felt that they were always second best, second class. And you leveled up by having sort of Caucasian community in your vicinity, or you married into one, and as such you suddenly became better. And it is a mindset. And honestly, there are products in, like, I last time I went back was late to it's about 2018, back to to Malaysia, and till today they sell body lotions, reputable big global brands, that we would get here on their shelf. The same products are there, but they're sold with skin whitening lotions. So they have formulas in it to whiten and make your skin lighter, because you're more valuable as a lighter skinned individual. And so that is ingrained in our society, that you are valued more if you're fairer in every single way. So the highest level you can be is white, right? And so it is perception. And that's why for us, like, to what we just talked about, you'd never see Morris dancing or waltzes coming
yeah.
being performed in local Malay, sort of at a local Malay wedding, because it'll be like, oh, that's really high class, right? Is it high class? I don't know, because I know some of Malay traditional dancings. Indian Bharatanatyam, for example, is an art form, but
Mm,
you train for multiple years to become this a superstar in it, but it doesn't have the same gravitas. Not in the at least my point of view, it doesn't have the same gravitas, and it should have the same gravitas as from a cultural lens point of view.
I like to think things are changing. Ch switching gears so slightly. How do you think that translates to the world of leadership and diversity in leadership? Like, how have you experienced diversity and leadership in your career so far?
I would say we've come leaps and bounds, right?
Mm,
Credit where credit is due. That what we have had is an opportunity to really have transparent conversations. And, kudos to the leaders that have come before us who've actually paved that way. And has that journey ended? No, we're still doing, like we talk about the far right movements in the UK right now, still taking place in the country right now. In the same way in the United States, we've had that. But we've also had leaders who have actually broken new ground for us and actually spoken up. That's led to policy change, industry change, and as a result, visible change in organizations. What has come very clear, and God bless the younger generations, because they're the driving force behind this. They've realized very quickly, like, there is power in your pocket. If you don't feel an affinity with a brand or a product or service, you don't spend the money. And when you don't spend the money, guess who hurt the company? And the reason they're not spending is they don't see themselves in that product and that service or that experience. So to see themselves, organizations, and you've heard this hot word, need to be culturally relevant. They need to be culturally relevant and speak to the different trigger points and the cultural touch points for these consumers. And that's driving a lot of that change. As a result, and if you do it as reverse engineering it, right? If you think about the work that needs to live and breathe and connect with this multicultural, multifaceted, multi-identifying audience, much younger audience set. So Gen Zs, millennials, and even some of the slightly more forward-thinking Gen Xs. You backtrack it. So if you think about so we're a creative agency. Within a creative agency, how can we put out work that really speaks to these people if you don't have the people who understand that audience, who live and breathe that experience, who come from that experience, that heritage? So it becomes a re-engineering of organizations. So in order to get that, then you need to have your your team and your makeup of individuals that actually understands this, and therefore comes from all these different walks of life, and therefore you start to diversify your workforce. They're going to be different people of different experiences, different cultural touch points, brought up in different parts of the world, speak different languages, have experienced things differently, have multiple identities. Like it's not just male or female, but every sort of spectrum under the book. So if you think about age, gender, race, sexuality, ability, and other sort of spectrums, how do you bring all of that? And you have to diversify your workforce. In order to do so, you need a leadership that knows how to lead a multicultural workforce, right? And speaks in this new language of the current world. And that has driven and forced that change. Are we there, fully there yet? Dear God, no. We're so far from it, but we have cracked that block. Right, we've made a few cracks in it. We're starting to actually start to make that change, and I think I particularly love sort of in the role that I'm at the moment. It's probably the most multicultural executive team I've been on that actually has that. Conscious inclusion is one of our sort of leading sort of North Stars, and we do that. And trust me, like even I have sort of upbringing and things that in my life that have sort of allowed me to or forced me to have blinkers on certain things, and I'm growing as a person because I kind of had a perception of life or culture in a certain way, and I'm like, oh shit, I didn't know that. I didn't actually experience that, and now I'm learning in that process as well. So I think being from a leadership point of view, and I it's so important, and I hopefully maybe this becomes the title of our conversation: humanity driven not by the color or creed or background of our skins and what we sort of define ourselves at, but at the heart of everybody is this inherent need to be human and treat everybody with humanity. That for me is where leadership should be. And because I do think if we use that and we really hone on that and focus on that as our North Star to lead with humanity, we start to see change in a very, very positive, encouraging way that also leads to fire within each one of us to ensure that we bring humanity to the rooms that we're in, to the environments that we're in, and to the people that we work with.
During the pandemic, we were given the opportunity to work more flexibly and from home, and I feel like we were treated a lot more like adults. And then post-pandemic, I feel like we're still treated a lot more like adults. But how would you say an organization could treat you more like a human if you're like us, from Southeast Asian heritage? So what does that actually mean to for us to be treated as humans? How would that differ to what our black and white colleagues would need?
There is and this is, pardon me if it's a generalization,
Mm.
but there is I think in the world, at least in my experience, my limited experience, there is a sort of perception of here, all the Caucasians, who, here's who's all non-person of color. They all go into this one bucket. Then everybody else who's every spectrum of every color and every creed goes into the other box. And I personally think that's where the mistake is in my experience, because everybody from every walk of life, and even within the Caucasian communities, they have different cultural experiences, different cultural touch points, different cultural expressions. In the same way, not every person of color, POC, has the same experience. So there are Black communities, there's Hispanic communities, there's Southeast Asian. Within that, there is also the Chinese. And like, I remember having this conversation once at a hotel here in Dallas. I'd gone for a pitch and I'd asked specifically, I had craving for Chinese food. And I went up to the concierge and said, like, I really love some Chinese food. And goes, do you mean Asian food? I went, no, I want Chinese food, i.e., from China, Chinese food. Because it goes, you need to be a little bit more woke. Like you need to stop referencing specifically like Chinese, etc., because that's kind of like that's rude. You should be embracing Asian culture, so you should refer to it as Asian. And it was actually said to me by a black man, right? So
Wow.
you kind of think people have just bucketed and not taken the time to actually understand what humanity meant and what culture meant to each individual culture. Will we know everything? No. But the whole point is open to learning, embracing those differences, and ask and question and learn. That's the nature of being human. We're constantly learning. I'll be learning till the day I die because there's so many things I don't know, and I don't know about so many cultures and experiences. But I think I'm what I have unearthed in me is this curiosity to learn, where I don't know, I ask questions. I don't just assume your experience shares is the same as mine, because we come from very different walks of life, but we're both Southeast Asian. But your experience as a Southeast Asian is very different to mine. So I wouldn't assume, it'll be completely ridiculous of me to assume that I can contextualize your experience just because I'm of the same we look the same, right? And I think for me, at least, that from a leadership point of view, that's my guiding principle. I don't assume the same experience. And therefore, I ask, I inquire, I try to learn from that. And so that next time I actually engage with a person with that particular background, I have some inclination of understanding what those triggers are. How can I make sure that I make that individual feel welcome, part of the community, by embracing their rich heritage and adding it to the rich tapestry of who we are becoming as a society.
I just want to round off the conversation a little bit more about what's going on at the moment. So
Mm.
walk us through a little bit about your role, your current work, what your vision is.
So as you know, I'm the Chief Growth Officer of McCann, New York, and we are the flagship operation within the McCann World Group portfolio of companies, which is a very big group. And really, like I've always been passionate. I transferred that knowledge and the experience in the boy band to the media side, because I remember thinking when I was in the boy band and we were being interviewed by the press, I thought one day if I'm not successful here, I'd like doing that job because it looks super interesting. And the craft of it was storytelling, right? Because journalists and media was all about telling the story of the person they were interviewing. And so for me, I've always been guided by the craft of storytelling. I love storytelling, and I hope this conversation feels quite natural because I'm not scripted. I'm telling you exactly based on your
Sure.
questions, my experience. Um, and I think for me, in my role right now, and I moved from doing public relations to then doing new business as a craft, because every relationship that I nurture and cultivate with prospects and clients leads to hopefully bringing opportunities into the business I work with for my team. So whether that's a strategist to a creative to a production lead to a business lead, etc., is helping tell that business's story, and whether that's a service or a product or an experience, whatever it is, it's about it's storytelling, brand storytelling. And ultimately, that as human beings, if you even go back to the days when we were created, like days of, however many years ago, we started life by sitting around a campfire and telling stories. That's how community grew. So the craft and art of storytelling has never changed. It's evolved to become more sophisticated, but the story, the kernel of it all is storytelling. So for me, I try to bring that in the craft of new business and I talked about bringing in the lived experience of each individual so that every conversation and every interaction with a prospect or a client is richer, is more informed. And clients, and I always like the number one buying decision by any brand, and they will be spending, hundreds of thousands to millions of dollars, is not, yes, strategy was great, creative is super important, fantastic. All these are, oh my God, fundamentals, right? These are all basic fundamentals. But the one I remember this conversation with a client one year that we had won the business back in the early 2000s. She said, "You were not the best agency. We saw four agencies, and your ideas." I said, "You were not the best agency in terms of idea. Your idea was like the third best. We liked two others a lot better. But when we thought about it, and we thought about when shit hits the fan and things go all wrong, who'd be the person that we'd love to go down to a pub, have a drink with, and solve it? And you guys were the only ones." And I realized very quickly the number one decision in every pitch I've been in ever since has been we loved the people. We sat in a room. We may not remember the ideas. There'll be so many agencies that pitch, and the ideas would all be similar, but they will remember the individuals. And that comes back to engaging in the room. And how do you engage? By engaging with real, heartfelt, authentic storytelling. If you come from a place of authenticity, you tell your story much more authentically. You connect with the human. That element of humanity, it's the greatest gift we all have. Humanity generally is the greatest gift, and it comes out by us just being completely authentic and natural in the way we connect with another human being. And for me, that exchange is human storytelling. And so I try to bring all of that common sense, frankly, if you ask me, into my line of work. And if I'm able to do that successfully, I'll actually really enjoy my life, my career, and try and end up doing it quite naturally. So I'm hoping that's one of the reasons I am where I'm at. I've actually worked really hard in my life to get here, but hopefully fueled and powered by this natural need to connect with humans and tell authentic storytelling in that exchange and lead by humanity.
I really like that, and I think it's good advice for anybody, either on a pitch or an interview or any sort of interaction, really, that that human connection is really important. You could have all of the right information
Hmm.
scripted and deliver it in whichever way, fantastically, flamboyantly, with the lights and all the rest. But if people don't like you on a human level, they can't connect with you. If they don't think that they can
Yep.
work, they can spend their time with you, then that's always going to be the nagging feeling. Even if you've got that role, that project, I think your days could be numbered. I genuinely really appreciated your time and the conversation. I know we went over a little bit, so thank you so much for your patience on that as well. I really enjoyed the conversation. Now, why don't you
Thank you,
hit us
Shez.
with that title? What is it that you're going to name this conversation?
I think, and again, first of all, Shez, thank you so much, and thank you for running this. You run this podcast as a passion point initially, but that passion point drives change. So thank you
Thank you.
for leading with your heart and helping everybody who listens to this in some small way. I think I would love to name this Humanity, Our Greatest Gift, because I like to think that's the message that I try to land in this, the good, the bad, and what we talked about. It is all guided by our humanity. And so if our humanity is good, it leads well. If our humanity isn't, it leads in a different direction. So I hope humanity being our greatest gift will be our greatest North Star collectively, whether person of color or not, to help all of us along the way and make this world a better place.
Beautiful. Love it. That's what it's going to be called.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Take care.